Welcome to Talk Your Shit podcast. I'm your host, Mylan Daniel, and I'm here with my mother and co-host, Myla Huffman. And I brought her on the show today so we could talk about HIV and STDs because I feel like that's a subject that people in my age group are not very educated on, and I think my mom can give some very good knowledge and help people better understand it because that is the field of work she works in. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Milo. I'm an adult geriatric nurse practitioner. I've been in the medical field for quite some time, since 2008. I've been a nurse practitioner for about 8 years now, and a little over 8 years. I've worked in HIV care, prevention, and STD treatment for about 8 years now. I currently am working in HIV prevention and STD testing.
So, what made you want to learn about HIV and STDs and kind of get in that field?
So when I graduated from high school, my first biology class, we had a guest speaker that came in and talked about HIV. And it was at that moment when I learned about HIV as a virus and how it affected the body that I knew that this was something that I was very interested in and wanted to have some kind of career treating or learning more or researching about HIV. So later on, I went into the medical field as a registered nurse. And in the area that I lived in, there wasn't a lot of HIV patients or people, or wasn't a high population for HIV that I knew of. So I couldn't find a job that worked with HIV patients. So I worked as an RN at different places, and then I was given the opportunity when I moved to South Texas to work in a Ryan White clinic, and I did HIV treatment and prevention as well as STDs there. And once I started taking care of the patients, I learned more and more about HIV, and my passion to continue to care for those patients grew.
Um, what, well, what did you learn as a young adult about HIV and STDs, or what did you know when you were my age?
I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything until I got to that college class and learned about HIV there. It wasn't really talked about. Once there was a lady that lived across the lane from us who they said had HIV or AIDS, and that was all I knew. We never seen her. Maybe once I might have seen her, but that was about the extent of it. No one ever talked much about it. No one even talked about STDs growing up either. It was our exposure to sex and STDs was very limited when we were in school.
Okay, so being in the field, uh, the medical field, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people say about HIV and AIDS? I think for me, just being a 20-year-old male, I think a lot of people think it's easier to contract than it is. Like somebody coughs, or maybe just somebody touches you, or just any kind of like common contact. I think people
I think
think
it's
that.
interesting that, your age group thinks that it's very contagious, which it is contagious, but it's not through common contact with anyone. But yet, you think that it's very contagious, but I've also found that a lot of the younger generation doesn't take it serious enough that they use protection or try to prevent HIV, which is really interesting. But the biggest misconception I think that, especially when I diagnose someone positive, that they're afraid that they're going to infect, the kids in their family, their relatives, that they can't eat off the same utensils or use the same bathroom. There's still a lot of um, misunderstandings and lack of education when it comes around HIV. I think because it's not in the headlines as much and it's not talked about as much, that people have forgotten to educate others on how it's spread and how to prevent it. So the biggest misconception is that you're going to get it from common contact.
Okay, so I just know me being in school, I don't think that they talked about it a lot or, really gave you a lot of information. Or if they did give us information, not enough. They didn't tell us enough for us to maybe retain it. So do you think schools, like high schools, teach kids enough um, about it?
No, I think that in certain states they don't teach sex education at all. Without sex education, there's not going to be HIV education on how to prevent or that it's still a thing. So I think that they should consider teaching kids about sex more and the possibilities of, not just pregnancy, but STDs and HIV because it's still really a thing. And let's be honest, everyone's going to have sex. So if you go out here blindly and you don't know what could possibly happen to you, then you're going to do things that could possibly get you exposed to everything. But if you have the knowledge and information, then you can make an informed decision on how to protect yourself. And you know what conversations you can have with your partners. You know what the possibilities could be, whether it's pregnancy or STDs. And I think that may allow people to think twice when making a decision about sex or partners or using protection if you know what could possibly happen to you.
Yeah, I think people don't, yeah, a lot, like I said, I don't think people my age know, so they don't like protect themselves, so that,
Yeah, so I
because
had
they
a
don't
patient.
know like the consequences and like what comes with it, and that.
Yeah, exactly. I had a patient once, 18-year-old guy. I think he's still in high school. He was diagnosed HIV positive, and he said that he didn't even think about HIV being a possibility or was concerned about it. He told me that his biggest fear was getting diabetes for whatever reason. And that's disheartening because you shouldn't fear diabetes that isn't a communicable disease more than HIV or STDs. I mean, these are things that change your life. Diabetes does too, but it's HIV is something that can be prevented with condoms and medication or preventative medication. So that I found to be a lot disappointing actually. That if he thought that way, then I'm sure his friends thought that way. And I'm sure there were conversations had with other people and kids in his school that also thought the same thing.
Yeah. So, in saying that, like, just your experience being, in Texas and in Georgia, what group of people do you think is most affected, or do you think it's more like case by case?
No, I found that in Georgia, men who had sex with men, black men who had sex with men were the newly diagnosed, and then black women were number two. And I found that these populations, I feel, is not given enough information, or the information isn't given to them in a way in which they retain the information, they take the information seriously. I think, it matters how it's delivered to these people. It matters, how you stress the importance of prevention and who says it too. If you have someone that doesn't represent you telling you something about your population, then you're going to be like, who are you to tell me about this? It's like if you had an older white lady telling young black men, 18 to 25, that, oh, you should use protection because you're going to get STDs. I mean, it may not be received the same as if you had a black man who was also in the LGBTQ community and was saying, hey, look, I walk the walk and talk the talk, and I see what it's like to be out here dating and in the clubs, and these are the possibilities. And when I was working at certain clinics, a couple years ago, it still may be the same or it may not be, but it was 1 out of every 2 black men who had sex with men in the Atlanta area were HIV positive. And if you give people that kind of information or those statistics, I think that they may take it more seriously, or when you deliver information to them a certain way, I think that they may be more receptive to it. And then I also think that black women are some of the populations that get forgotten about, because they don't think that the black women are at risk because it's a gay disease. But they're number 2 in newly diagnosed in the Atlanta area for a reason, because there is HIV in the heterosexual community, and more education, more information needs to be given to these populations so that we can prevent the newer diagnosis or newly diagnosed people in that population.
So, in there being not like very little education, I feel, as just so people know, what are some of the most common ways to contract HIV or an STD?
So the number 1 way is through sex. Sex being vaginal, anal sex. You know, whether you're top, bottom, receptive, penetrating, receptive intercourse, you're at a higher risk than someone who is penetrating, meaning the woman is at a higher risk, or the bottom with men are at a higher risk of getting HIV if they have sex with someone who's HIV positive. But the top, or the male, or the penetrator, can also be exposed and is also at risk for getting HIV. So sex is number 1, mother to baby, and then it's not a high likelihood in our country of getting it through blood transfusions. I'm not even sure if they have many infections across the world at this point, but I'm just not, I don't know those statistics, but sex and mother baby.
So, are STDs is the same way?
No, so with STDs it's a little bit different, meaning it's still the same risk with sex. Intercourse is going to expose you, period, to STDs. Any kind of genital touching, so you can have a penis touch a vagina, or a penis touch a rectum, and or oral sex, and you can still get an STD if there's a syphilis lesion, or if there's a herpes lesion or HPV or genital warts, you can still get it without actual penetration. But you can also get STDs through oral sex. You can get all the STDs through unprotected oral sex, whether you're giving it or receiving it. If a person has it in their throat, or they have a lesion of any kind, you can still get it that way.
Okay, so just so you can help the people out, because you just said all the common ways to contract it. What are some of the ways to help prevent the spread of these STDs and HIV?
So condom usage, of course, is a good way to prevent all STDs. Abstinence, of course, but we know that people aren't going to be abstinent. And then for HIV, there is PrEP medication, which is the medication that you take every day to prevent you from getting HIV. So it's simply a pill that you wake up and you take in the morning or at nighttime, whenever you like to, at the same time every day, that will ensure that you are protected. Now, of course, it does have to be prescribed by a medical professional, and there are lots of organizations and providers that offer the medication: primary care doctors, STD clinics, PrEP clinics. There's lots of online options that you can get the medication. You can get tested, you get your labs monitored, and you get prescribed the medication. So that's a great way to prevent. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to your primary care doctor, or talking to a stranger in person, or discussing your sexuality, there's online options where you can talk to somebody online and they can prescribe the medication for you. You don't have to go into a clinic and be embarrassed about being seen at a STD clinic or an AIDS clinic, you can do it online in the comforts of your home. You can do labs at home, and then medication can be sent to you. So there are options, whether you want to go in person or if you're a little more shy or embarrassed, and you can do it online. But there are options for everyone, and you can feel comfortable protecting yourself in many different ways.
So how effective is the PrEP medication?
So PrEP medication, when taken properly, is over 99% effective if you take it every day at the same time every day. And we currently have 2 medications, one with a generic that you can take for prevention, and then we have an injection that was recently FDA approved that you can also get, and you can get from a provider.
Is the injection every day too? Or?
No, the injection is every 2 or 3 months. I'm not exactly sure on all the details on that, because it's not a medication that I'm prescribing just yet. So I do believe I want to say every 3 months. I'm not sure exactly, but it's either 2 or 3 months.
Okay, in talking about the medicine and the ways to prevent it, how far has the medicine come from maybe since the first case of HIV and AIDS, and like till now, or even since you've been a nurse till now?
It's come leaps and bounds. If you look at shows and movies like Pose, where it was back in the 80s and 90s, where people were dying and the medication was toxic and they were really sick, and they watched their friends die, to where now, there's commercials on TV on taking the medication. There's many different options as far as what type of medication you can take, how often you can take it. There's treatment with injections. There's daily pills that you can take. So there's a slew of options now, and we have the HIV or medical community, we have learned so much on how to take care of people and ensure that they can live healthy, regular lives.
Well, how do you think there will be a vaccine or a cure within the next 10, 20 years? Or
So that I'm not sure about either. I think that hopefully it will be in our lifetime. I know that they work diligently on trying to get the vaccine and trying to get a cure. I don't think that research and work and efforts will ever stop until we do reach a point where we will come up with a vaccine or a cure. So I know that people are working very hard, but as far as when, it's hard to say. It's such a tricky virus when it's in the body. And even though we can get a person undetectable, which means it doesn't show up in their blood, with medication, it still hides out in your lymphocytes. So it'll hide from the medication, and then if you stop taking it, it'll come back out and say, haha, I'm still here. So it's hard. So it's a tricky virus that it's hard to get rid of, and we still work, or the researchers and scientists still work really hard on trying to figure that out.
Okay, well, that's gonna be the end. I just wanted to come on here and have my mom on here so she could educate everybody that maybe didn't know as much or didn't know anything at all about HIV or AIDS or STDs, or the help that you can get, or the ways to prevent it, and the ways to contract it. So I appreciate y'all listening and watching. And until next time, peace.
Later.
I got double D's, look, but don't play with these, Nina on my hip, these are mirror jeans, huh.